This is Breaking Down Security, and I'm Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Boettcher for Breaking Down Security.
Good to be back.
It has been a little while. I mean, a lot of our last podcasts were pre-recorded or, just kind of on the fly. But it's nice to just get back with just you and me, doing our thing, lone wolves, doing what we're doing. So
yeah, I think people like that. I mean, it's always good to have expert guests on, but then again, I like to do a lot of research, on my own on certain topics, and then share what I learned with everybody. So, I think I take advantage of that, listening to other podcasts and reading other articles people write. So, it's good to do that as well.
Yeah. It's nice to have you back as a co-host and not as a guest, because that was a whole weird dynamic that I don't want to go through again. So,
well, we won't do that anymore.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, it was quite interesting to hear about LogMD, and apparently it's had quite a bit of success since even before that interview we discussed with Michael Goff. He did it at a Splunk conference. I believe he talked about it at B-Sides DC. So it's definitely getting a lot of mileage. So we hope to have you guys back on to discuss new innovations with that in the coming days.
Yeah, and he's had really good feedback, and nothing negative. It's all been positive that I know of. People are like, wow, this is really cool, and the whole idea is that it's actionable. You can go home 8:00, start work and the next day, and by 8:30 you've already got the proper logging settings on your computer to be able to catch malicious activity, right? Because the right logging isn't on by default, as we said. And then hopefully if you've got the right infrastructure in place and you are able to make changes in your environment, I mean, you could push those policies out across the enterprise by lunch.
Sure.
It's that fast and it's that actionable, that you can perform those duties quickly, and then you'll be in a lot better shape.
Yep. And the important thing is the tool's free. So as long as you can go and download it, then you're good to go.
Yeah, if you can download it.
Yep. All right. Well, the Breaking Down Security isn't sponsored by LogMD. Maybe in the future when y'all get rich, you'll be able to, pass the plate round, to help us get, uber powerful in the biz here. But this week we're getting back to our roots. We're going back to discussing various things. One of the talks that I thought went really well that I didn't get to see at DerbyCon was the WMI?
Yeah.
Yeah.
WMI, so sexy.
Yep. And it had Matt Graber and a couple of other gentlemen from FireEye on there. They gave a lot of great information, and it made me and Mr. Boettcher want to talk a little bit more about WMI, what it is. I know that a lot of people out there, probably Windows admins, have never heard of it, or, blue teamers and red teamers alike have never heard of it. Yet it's been in the background of Windows since the times of Windows 95.
Yeah, it has. It's been there for quite a while. And, I think what's new in it is that, well, we'll get into that. I think it's important to go into a little bit of background of what WMI is or what it was.
Exactly.
And then why all the fuss now about it? Like it's some new technology. Well, it's been there since the beginnings of Windows. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I think first let's talk about WBEM.
WBEM.
WBEM. It's called Web-Based Enterprise Management. And the purpose of web-based enterprise management is to kind of unify the management of distributed computing environments. So WBEM is like a framework for for admins to push out changes or whatnot across the organization, and to do that standardize across Windows, Linux, and Mac, if Linux and Mac conform to these standards. And that's what they're trying to do.
And so, the idea is they all kind of have at least a basic web-based enterprise management schema, if you will. I know there's several different options. You have what they call the Common Information Model, XML. So it's almost like a structured query language, or like a database query language, where you can go out on your network and query and find, whether you're working on the SANS top 20 to try to find out what assets are on your network, what ports are open on boxes. The sky's the limit. Sky's the limit, really.
Right. And I think these specifications on which the CIM is accessed, and that's called the Common Information Model, right? So there's this organization called the Distributed Management Task Force Incorporated, and what they have is the CIM, which is the Common Information Model. So I looked at a couple of examples of this specification, right? And one of them I looked up was the query language specification. So it's a document that they have, and it says, here's the specification that you should follow. And they have things in the document like, here's the reserved words. Here's how to perform a join on the query, because the document was about the query language in particular.
Yeah.
And, here's the different types of aggregations like count and min and sum. So they have all these documents. I think they have 30 or 40 different documents on these particular specifications.
Okay, so what are you mentioned reserved words. What are those? Are those like words you can't make a host name by, select star or something? You can't make this host called select or other or something like that?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's, a reserved word for that query language.
Righto.
And here's the goal. The CIM's goal, and this is directly from their site. It says the goal is to provide a common definition of management information for systems, networks, applications, and services, and allows for vendor extensions. So vendor extensions meaning if you create some sort of tool, then it can potentially be universal for Windows, Linux, and Mac.
Or there's a basic set of instructions, and then there's Mac-isms, and there's Windows-isms, and there's Linux-isms.
Not according to this, right? If you want to query, let's say you want to query all events that took place in a certain time frame, it's going to be the same query across all three types of operating systems, apparently.
Okay, so when I was looking at it, it reminded me a lot of SNMP, which is another type of network managed protocol. It's the simple network managed protocol, which works for routers and switches and those things. Those the information you get from an SNMP query is a lot like what you would get from a WMI query. You're interacting using a GUI in some cases, a command line in other cases. You may even use an API call to be able to pull that information off of your network. So
exactly, that type of information is useful for admins or for people who are using certain tools or building certain tools, right? It's ideal to have one tool that talks to all three operating systems instead of having three different tools for that. If you happen to have different operating systems, you're not an all-in-one shop. So WMI stands for Windows Management Instrumentation. So like you said, it's been around since the days of 95, and it's a framework, like we said, of administration. The new thing here is Windows changed it a little bit they changed it a lot to conform to these standards. So before, it wasn't really conforming to the CIM. Now it is, and Windows calls it MI. Management Instrumentation, I guess for short.
Yeah.
So it's the latest version of this WMI technology. So that's the new thing here. That's what all the buzz is about, and it's new since Windows 8 and Server 2012. So I guess what coders did before, and this is what I use in LogMD, is called the COM coding. Right? COM stands for Common Object Model.
That's right.
So, it's supposed to be language agnostic. This is why you see languages like Python. They're so feature rich in Windows. It's because they use these COM calls to access the internals of the operating system, right? So these COM calls, there's like 4 steps to calling the kernel of Windows, right? You initialize the library and the object, meaning a DLL is loaded. Then you call a method on that object. Then you do something with the data that you retrieved by calling that method, right? And you've got your data, you manipulate it however you want. And then you just, at the end, you destroy the object.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an object-oriented way. And I don't know when they introduced the COM model. I think it was around 2000 days. And that was the new hotness back then. So this MI was developed by Microsoft, and I think I read somewhere that they've taken COM and basically put it in maintenance mode. Like they're not going to add any more features to it, or add any more, for lack of a better word, COMs or objects to that particular thing. But they're going to focus on MI from now on.
Yeah, and MI uses SOAP, which is a simple object access protocol, which is I want to say it's like a RESTful type protocol, like you would have with a web access or a web API, and it allows you to communicate with HTTP and XML documents, which of course everyone knows XML is kind of like a glue that binds a lot of different protocols and things together. So that makes it even more extensible, and it makes it more allowable for intercommunications. More universal, exactly. Yeah. So SOAP it's just a messaging protocol that runs on disparate operating systems. So it's supported by pretty much every operating system under the sun in some form or another. If you have the right, they're not schemas. They're like some kind of document that tells you what each field does, kind of like XSLT in XML.
Okay, and then lots of different programming languages can use SOAP or XML extensively.
Yep.
So I think the reason, I guess, that they created MI and really built upon it was that it makes it way easier to code. So we're seeing WMI more being used more in malware nowadays, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, one of the talks that at DerbyCon, the WMI talk, they had talked about, they didn't have a very good understanding of WMI when they were doing some client engagements, and they found that these people who were doing the engagements, the bad guys they were trying to keep out had an excellent knowledge of WMI and how everything works, and trying to keep them out was a complete pain in the butt. And, they would basically patch up one system here, and they would, use the WMI calls to move laterally almost invisibly across the network. It was very interesting for them. And if you watch the talk, it's about 48 minutes, but it's well worth the listen.
So you mentioned move laterally. The way they did that was they had an admin account. And, most organizations will put admin accounts on every, endpoint system, including Active Directory or whatever systems they have. And that's how, with an admin account, you can pretty much access any box and completely own any box very swiftly, because WMI makes it so easy. And stealthily, right? It doesn't leave very many signatures on your system.
Yeah, you have to be either a local admin or a domain admin to use WMI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes,
if
you
you're
do.
just a regular user, you are, you're not going to get much out of it. But a lot of times, a lot of companies give their people local admin privileges on their boxes. So if somebody gets onto your box, they can use WMI calls in Windows
That's right.
and other web-based enterprise management systems on other systems to, wreak havoc on your network. And this is starting to become a new hotness and being seen by a lot of organizations.
So yeah, and of course, if we don't mention PowerShell, we're doing a disservice. I mean, PowerShell is feature rich in WMI.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, they have commandlets like shortcuts for running WMI commands inside of PowerShell. There's hundreds of them.
I mean, if you use Windows and you're technical and you want to know how to increase your net worth quickly, I can't think of better advice to give you than to learn PowerShell. I mean, It's pretty much the future of Windows everything.
Yep.
And WMI is fully integrated in PowerShell completely.
Okay.
I mean, we talked to Mick Douglas about it too. He raves about PowerShell and Ben 10 as well. I mean, you can query 10,000 machines in seconds.
Yeah, he lerves himself. Yeah, they lerved themselves some PowerShell. Yeah. So let's talk about the structure of WMI and how it's used. There's 4 very specific types of data structures in WMI. One of them is classes. Maybe you could, because you wrote this document, what exactly is a class?
Well, it gets back to object-oriented, right? You have all these classes that are pre-written in WMI, and you can query those classes and learn about what those classes do. And then the second thing is objects. You create objects of those classes. So an object is an instance of a class. And then you can create or you can call methods against those objects.
Okay,
and like I said with COM earlier, you call methods to gather data.
Yeah. Okay, so an example is and one thing I will say about Microsoft on this, they've got excellent documentation. If you go to their MSDN site and do a search for WMI, you're going to find a ton of information about this. I mean, it's amazing just how massive WMI is. It's like almost a whole operating system by itself. I mean, and it needs more documentation than just Windows operating system. So some of the examples of system classes you'll get from WMI is cache control determines when WMI should release a component object model or a COM object. CIMOM identification describes the local installation of WMI. So you can actually do, what was it, in the talk they had 3 different things. They had internal WMI calls, you have external WMI calls, and you even have something called meta calls where you can make calls against WMI itself to find out what WMI is doing, which I found interesting. But yeah, there's several thousand of these classes. When they first started, they didn't have so many in Windows 95, but the last thing I saw about Windows 7 was there was over 9,000 different classes that you could call on a Windows box. I mean, everything down to, power level management, how much battery life is left in your laptop.
That's right. There's a class for battery.
There's a class for battery.
It tells you everything about the dang battery, what's going on, what it is, and all kinds of crap. So,
all the sensors, everything, yeah.
When I ran the query on my Windows 7 machine, I got about 1,000 classes, and those were just the root classes.
Okay.
So the GUI that I was using, and we'll talk about that a little later, it didn't query the subclasses. So I didn't have time to find out how to query all the subclasses underneath all those classes. But the fact is there's 1,000 root classes.
Wow.
Right. And then, based on whatever class you look into, it didn't do any recursive searches, unfortunately.
Yeah, and of course it has its own query language. So the WMI query language allows you, it's very SQL-like. Select, this class, where, and you can actually put in filters. So you can say, okay, select all events from, when somebody logs in, and it will actually
Yeah.
send you when people are logging in. So it almost, what they call it, a hostless IDS, and you can actually turn WMI into like what they called a hostless IDS.
Yeah,
It'll
they
tell
mentioned
you,
it was free and available to anybody who has a
yeah,
Windows system. I mean, it's like an IDS for all your endpoint machines and your servers,
yep,
right?
yep,
So yeah, that's the beauty of it. And then you have you also have event classes. So you can query for certain types of events, within a time frame or in real time. And you can subscribe to events as well. So basically anything, any event that happens on the computer is queryable, right?
yeah,
That's the power of WMI. You can, and COM as well, right? That's what we're utilizing for LogMD, but this is the same thing, and it's much easier. You can trigger on a query virtually, any conceivable Windows event.
yep.
And that's the point. There's, I don't know, a virtually limitless power with WMI, and that's why people are excited about it. That's why attackers are excited about it now.
Yeah.
Because this MI standard that came out with Windows 8 pretty much changed the landscape for being able to code this stuff. I mean, you don't need to write C code anymore you just use PowerShell, right?
Yeah. Or you can actually, there's Python modules. You can actually do a Python WMI module.
Definitely.
You can import any kind of scripting language, VB script. There's actually a specific WMI command line. There's also GUIs as well that you can get. The sky's the limit with, and there's no barrier to entry. If you aren't good with command line, just go and get a GUI. And you can query it much like Windows Explorer. From what I saw, it allowed you to pull everything, and then you can use little drop downs and get down to where you need to see the information that you need, which I found quite interesting. So I will definitely try that out. I actually don't have a lot of boxes on my network like I used to. I used to have a lot more Windows boxes at home, but I'll have to try that out on a couple of Windows 10 boxes that I've got. So
yeah, you gonna learn PowerShell?
You know what?
It's pretty much more powerful now than Python is,
I know, and it's on my list of things, but there's always about 150 things I need to learn on there. So
priorities.
I got priorities, yeah. So okay, here's the problem though: blue teamers who aren't savvy in WMI, how do we help blue teamers understand that the bad guys are going to start using this more often, especially if your company allows you to have local admin on your box? If once somebody gets local admin, they'll have your whole network at some point, home or office network.
Well, I think there's a distinction to be made between the local admin and the directory admin, or the admin for the environment. If you have admin on your machine and your account is compromised, the attacker can take over your machine.
Sure.
They can't necessarily attack other machines with that account. Now, they can sniff around, I guess, and there is an attack in Kali. I forgot what the program is, but it's basically you grab the hash of the admin account and you can start doing WMI calls across the organization and start popping machines that way.
Yeah.
So it's basically a new version of Pass the Hash.
Okay.
So that's all you need. You just need the hash.
Yep.
Which is kind of scary. So it's important, kids, to encrypt all your your transmissions, right?
Encrypt all the things.
Yes,
exactly.
In transit, at rest. I mean, that's you always hear that. That's basics of security, right? Try to encrypt everything in transit, at rest, blah blah blah.
Yep.
So being in security, what do you need to know about WMI? There's a few things. There's that it can be utilized remotely, like we've talked about. Once you have admin access to a particular server, you can use WMI to pwn that system remotely.
Yep.
Not a problem.
But it's noisy though, right? So it will show up in logs if you've got your logging and everything set up properly. I know we're beating the logging horse to death, but really that's the only way you're going to tell if somebody is using WMI calls, because you'll see, created process or, interactive login on these boxes that don't necessarily get interactive logins.
Yeah, well, I can't say definitely because I haven't done enough research on this, but WMI is detectable. Okay, so it's not a complete attacker's playground, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit as well. The thing is, you have to log properly, and that's what we're all about. At the logmd.com or whatever.
World headquarters.
Nice. Is you have to set logging properly. Otherwise, this stuff is going to be stealthy and you won't detect it.
Yep.
Right. And the way you can do that is turn on command line logging and also process creation. Mm-hmm. So a process needs to be created in a lot of this. And so for those particular processes, you can log those and be able to detect them.
Yep.
There's also other ways which we will get into later with LogMD, but yeah, basically these events can be logged, but they're not on by default. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the one thing I was saying is, some guy out there is like, well, if it's so, difficult to do or whatever, why don't you turn that off, or why don't you disable WMI? And, we did some looking around on this, and, that's what I thought too. I was like, oh, you just turn this off and you just use GPOs or whatever. You can use GPOs, and you can actually use the dynamic filtering qualities of WMI to, make your GPOs more granular. But by turning off your WMI, you lose the ability to actually manage the systems on your network. So, boxes that are in your AD system, in your AD, once you disable WMI, your AD doesn't necessarily see all the information or see information that allows your hosts to stay on the network. So it's not easily disabled as many people would like to believe. Unlike SNMP, you can run SNMP on a host, and that'll send out like network information. You can disable that, and that doesn't cause any real detriment to your system. But killing WMI or killing the comm stuff will just totally hose your network.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's important to note that you can turn the service off. However, you're going to have to make a choice. Do you want the limitations associated with it, or do you want the risks associated with turning it on?
Yeah.
And that's why we do the podcast, right? We're going to, by helping ourselves and helping you, educate defenders and attackers too. In that way, you can make a choice as to what you're going to do.
Yep.
Right. So if red teamers find that they've got an admin account, this is a powerful tool, and this needs to be brought up to defenders. Definitely, that they've got a gaping hole here with WMI, and they need to be able to detect what you're doing on their systems. So I think as a red teamer, you really need to look into this. As a blue teamer, you need to educate yourself on the power that WMI has and how to use it to your advantage as a defender. Because, with all this power for attackers, there's an equal amount of power for defenders as well. Let's talk about some of the tools that can interact with WMI.
Okay.
If you wanna learn more about it, practice with it, maybe come up with some blue team defensive techniques. What can you use?
Yep. So one of the things is there's a WMI scripting, so you can create scripts. Very much like a bash script or something that you can use to manage with WMI.
Is that the Windows Management Instrumentation command line?
I think that's separate. I'm actually trying to look up an example of a WMI script.
Oh, okay. So you can have VB script and JScript. Both Windows scripts are very powerful WMI utilizers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can also make WMI calls with C++, C.NET.
Yep.
And then there's the WinRM, Windows Remote Management can also utilize it. I mean, Windows Remote Management, it must be running as a service on the destination host. By default, this is on auto, right?
Yep.
So if you don't utilize WinRM, you probably want to turn it off.
Yep, you can actually, going back to the Windows WMI scripting thing, I found a website. This guy's got, he uses mostly VB script, but you can also use Microsoft's Scriptmatic tool. And you can also, most of the other scripts were created by my WMI code generator. Oh, it looks like he has a code generator. So he's able to display BIOS information. He's got a script here that determines the boot disk, partition, and drive letters. Checks if you have required permissions on a specified registry key. You can check, well, I guess you can even check to see if the screen resolution meets a minimum requirement. Serial port information, CPU load in a CSV format.
Like we said, any event.
Yeah, so you can do resource monitoring with this too. So you can watch your systems and go, oh, my CPU's blasting at 110%. Why is that happening? Or why is my fans coming on?
Pegged. What is he doing? Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff you can do. This list drive letters, disk space summaries, print and print to commands for all associated files. A lot of this is older XP and 2000 stuff, but these commands should still run pretty well in even the latest versions of Windows. And the good thing about WMI, if you still have, God forbid, old Windows XP stuff or Windows 2000 stuff or NT stuff on your network, you can talk to it through a Windows 10 or Windows 8 box. Everything is backwards compatible because it's just building upon what it already has.
Well, I think that not the newest stuff, the MI, you can buy packages for Windows 7 and Windows 2008 R2, I think, but you won't be able to utilize the new stuff like the WQL in Windows XP, but you can still use the obviously the WMI calls.
Yeah.
As they were before.
Yeah, you can still run queries on the older boxes to find out, information. You won't have the several thousand more classes that you used to have or that you have now on the newer Windows. And actually, you can even create your own classes too. So,
Oh, that's right.
That's one of the things that they mentioned on the podcast, not on the podcast, but that DerbyCon talk was bad guys are creating their own classes and then, scripting up, events that will happen if somebody calls the classes. So if you call a script called bob.exe and you can have a WMI event in there that says, okay, when bob.exe is ran, run this, which they've, I don't know if that actually logs when new events are created, but that might be something interesting to look at as well.
And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention PowerShell again. PowerShell, is another tool that uses WMI, and it's probably the premier tool going forward. Mm-hmm. There's also GUIs, right? Every system that has PowerShell has WBEM test.exe. So if you do start run and type in WBEM test.exe, you get the GUI.
Yep.
Right? And there's a lot of other third-party GUIs as well.
Yep.
And I thought this was cool. There's also ODBC drivers for WMI available. So you can access WMI, the full gambit of it, in an Excel document.
That's gross. That's filthy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of advantages of using WMI as an attacker.
Yeah.
It's installed and running by default on all Windows operating systems, right?
Yep.
You can code execute. It offers very stealthy alternatives to running other executables. You can create a permanent event subscription So and these run as systems. So you can create a subscription to be called when some event happens, like, oh, the system boots up. So then your executable runs when the system boots up. So you can maintain, as an attacker, you can maintain persistence on that box. And I'm sure there's malware out there, probably that we don't even know about yet, that uses WMI to maintain persistence. And, and we talked about pretty much every operating system event can trigger a WMI event.
Oh yeah.
And you can query on those events.
Yep.
And then other than storing this trigger or this event, WMI event, in the WMI repository, which is a single database file, your payloads don't even touch the disk.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So the forensics is real hard for defenders, and they talk about this in the DerbyCon talk that you mentioned. They basically decomposed the database file and found out how it worked.
Yeah, because it's in a binary format, so you can run strings on it and you can get some things, but a lot of the things were basically in a binary format that they had to decode themselves with a.
It was decoded, right?
Yeah, they had to decode it.
And they wrote a tool, right, or a couple of tools, right, to help you, so you can query on the database offline even.
Yep.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So, all right. Well, what like we always do, what kind of takeaways did you get from this, Mr. Boettcher?
Well, my takeaway was, it's not new. It's just a new way of doing what was already there, which is a lot easier. So, while WMI does sound scary on the surface, just keep in mind that for every attack that can be performed on a Windows system, there's an equally effective defense for that attack. So, the age-old issue is still at play, and that is, if you're not educated and you're not ready for certain types of attack, you're going to lose. So that's the important thing here, is we need to educate ourselves about WMI so that we'll be ready to defend against it.
Yeah. Well, my takeaway is this has really become kind of an iceberg thing. I use Windows, but I don't use Windows. There are some people out there that are using Windows, and WMI is one of those things that you're really getting down into the real meat of the OS at this point. It just shows what kind of, not just with WMI, but any web-based enterprise management framework. I don't think it's something that a lot of companies use, or if they do, they kind of take it for granted that it's there, but they don't really use that to its utmost. And by us not using it to its utmost for the past 15 years, at least on Windows, that's a tool that we could be using to, monitor our systems, to, do resource planning and capacity planning, those kinds of things. And also to help defend against attacks, because you can see these things happening as they're going. Especially with the meta events where you can call WMI and go, okay, I want to know when WMI calls are being made by WMI, and WMI is like, okay, I will let me know when me is doing things, that kind of thing. So, it's definitely something I'm going to be doing more information, more research on, not just on the Windows side, but to see what I can get by querying, the WBEM on Linux or on my MacBook here, to see, what I can get out of that. So that's really awesome. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, with WMI, you can even create an event consumer that consumes events which consume creation events.
Wow.
Right?
That's cyclical, man.
So that's how you can defend against those consumer creation events.
So you create events for events for events.
You can create you can create an event consumer which creates events that are triggered by the creation of an event consumer.
Wow, that's some Ouroboros kind of stuff right there, sir. The snake is eating its own tail at that point, I'm thinking. So, yeah, wow. Okay.
Yes, the MC Escher definition.
Yeah, no joke. So, yeah, I think this is a topic we're going to have another podcast on and have somebody smarter than us come on and help us out with that. So.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I learned a lot over the past few days looking this over.
Yeah.
And, it's stuff I'll be incorporating into the tool as
Excellent.
well.
Very nice.
You got to be able to defend against this stuff. And if you don't have the knowledge to or the knowledge of WMI, you're going to be left in a lurch.
Yep.
So, and I'm here to help out the community. So as much as I can do to put into LogMD and give, I guess, users a little bit more confidence.
Yep. Right on. All right. Well, Mr. Boettcher, how would people get a hold of you on the internets?
You can catch me on Twitter. My handle is @BoettcherPwned, BoettcherPwned.
Right on. All right. And you can find me at Brian Brake, BryanBrake. We're on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/breakingdownsec. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I've been starting posting a lot of the old podcast episodes as LinkedIn posts because it seems like a lot of people are finally seeing those, so that's a good thing. Hey, we're on TuneIn. So if you have a TuneIn app...
What's TuneIn?
TuneIn, I use it for internet radio stations. I listen to some internet radios when I'm at work in my office here. And it's an app. I know it's on Mac because I found it. It's on Windows Store. It's on your Android and iDevices. And if you go and search there on for Breaking Down Security podcast, we're in the programs directory, and you can go and listen to any of our podcasts all the way back to the very beginning. So
when we were young and foolish.
Yes, we did a lot of things that we weren't happy, forced to do. So, but yeah, you can go back and listen to all 90 some episodes of our podcast through TuneIn Radio, and you can tell your friends about that. And we also have an RSS feed, which I think is how TuneIn actually gets its information, through the RSS, which is www.breaking.security.com. And so that was really exciting. I was glad that TuneIn allowed us to join their little program network. Are we forgetting anything? Oh yeah, the official BrakeSec Twitter is @BrakeSec, BRAKE-SEC. So I'm gonna go off the cuff here. I'm gonna congratulate Mr. Boettcher on his new position at the company we won't talk about.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
yes,
well, new adventure, sir. And it's with a couple of people we know quite well. And I'd like to thank that person for bringing you on. So, that's it for this week. And Mr. Boettcher, any last parting words?
Always keep learning. That's all I have to say.
Right on.
I mean, I've done myself a service by helping others, service themselves, listening to this podcast, and I look forward to the next topic, because I'm all about learning as much as I can about security and expanding my horizons that way. I think if we don't keep ourselves educated, how's the saying go? If you don't move forward, you're doomed to failure, or something like that. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh, it's very profound.
It is.
Yeah.
I messed that up, but anyway, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. It's why I've got my continual 150 items that I've got to learn about on and it's constantly dumping one thing and adding a new thing. So I totally understand. So, all right, Mr. Boettcher, listeners, thank you for downloading and listening to us and putting us in your earballs this week. And we hope you'll come back again soon, and have a great week.
Bye-bye.